Imagine a lonely stretch of Route 66 where a motorcycle bursts into flames and a chance encounter ignites a journey no one saw coming. He's a small-town mechanic with a heart of gold. She's a mysterious biker hiding a billion-dollar secret. What happens when kindness meets danger and two lost souls find each other in the fire? Stick around. This is a story of love, courage, and the magic that happens when you least expect it. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it means you won't miss a single twist of this incredible ride. Now let's dive into Poor Mechanic Helped a Biker Whose Motorcycle Caught Fire, then discovered she was a secret billionaire. The sun hung low over Route 66, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the endless amber plains of the American Midwest. It was late afternoon, the kind of golden hour that painted everything in a soft, forgiving light, perfect for masking the weariness of a long day. Caleb Wheeler, Cal to anyone who knew him, eased his battered pickup truck along the empty stretch, the engine rumbling like an old friend who'd seen too many miles. At 35, Cal was a man of quiet habits, his hands stained with grease, his hazel eyes carrying a depth that spoke of dreams deferred. The dusty toolbox in the truck bed rattled with every bump, a reminder of the life he'd built in Dusty Hollow, a speck of a town clinging to the edge of nowhere. He was humming an old Johnny Cash tune, letting the wind whip through the open window when a sharp pop pierced the stillness. His foot eased off the gas, and his eyes narrowed as a plume of black smoke rose from the roadside ahead. "Well, hell," he muttered, pulling the truck over with a practiced flick of the wheel. Through the haze, he saw it, a sleek black motorcycle, its chrome glinting in the dying light, flames licking up from the engine like a beast waking from a nap. And then he saw her. She was a vision, one that didn't belong on this lonely stretch of highway. A woman, maybe 28, with long chestnut hair spilling over a leather jacket, stood wrestling with the bike, a look of fierce determination on her face. She was beautiful, not in the polished way of magazine covers, but in the raw, untamed way of someone who'd faced the world head-on. She swatted at the flames with her jacket, cursing under her breath, her voice carrying a lilt that didn't quite match the desperation of the moment. Cal didn't hesitate. He grabbed the ancient fire extinguisher from under his seat, a relic he'd kept more out of habit than hope, and leapt from the truck. "Hey, step back!" he called, striding toward her with the calm urgency of a man who'd fixed more emergencies than he cared to count. She spun around, startled, her green eyes locking onto his for a split second before she obeyed, stumbling back onto the dry grass. The extinguisher coughed to life with a hiss, and Cal doused the flames in a cloud of white foam. The acrid smell of burning rubber filling the air. When the last flicker died, he lowered the canister, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "You okay?" he asked, turning to her. She nodded, brushing soot from her jeans. "Yeah, thanks to you." Her voice was steady now, softer, with a trace of something he couldn't place, gratitude maybe, or relief. Up close, she was even more striking, her features sharp yet warm, like a painting you couldn't stop staring at. "I thought I'd lost her for good," she said, glancing at the bike with a mix of affection and frustration. "Her?" Cal raised an eyebrow, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "Blackbird," she replied, patting the handlebars. "She's been with me through a lot." "Well, Blackbird's a fighter, but she's not out of the woods yet," Cal said, crouching. To inspect the damage, the engine was a mess, charred wires, a busted fuel line. He straightened up, dusting his hands on his faded flannel shirt. "I can fix her up for you. Got a shop a few miles down in Dusty Hollow. No charge." Her eyes widened, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to," he said simply, meeting her gaze. "Folks out here help each other. That's how it works." She studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words against some unseen scale. Then she smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips that lit up her face like the first star in a twilight sky. "I'm Eve," she said, extending a hand. "Evelyn, really, but Eve's fine." "Cal Wheeler," he replied, taking her hand. Her grip was firm, her skin cool despite the heat of the day. Something about her, maybe the way she held herself or the quiet strength in her eyes, stirred a curiosity in him he hadn't felt in years. "You're a mechanic?" she asked, nodding toward his truck. "Born and raised," he said with a chuckle. "My dad used to say I came out of the womb with a wrench in my hand. Come on, I'll tow Blackbird back. You can ride with me if you don't mind the mess." Eve hesitated, glancing at the motorcycle, like it was a lifeline she wasn't ready to let go of. Then she nodded. "All right, lead the way, Cal Wheeler." As they hooked the bike to the truck's hitch, Cal couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just another roadside rescue. Eve moved with a grace that didn't fit the chaos of the moment, and her silence carried a weight he couldn't decipher. Who was she, really? A drifter passing through, a runaway with a story she wasn't ready to tell. He pushed the questions aside, focusing on the task at hand, but a spark of something, hope maybe, flickered in his chest. The drive back to Dusty Hollow was quiet at first, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. Then Eve broke the silence. "You always this quick to help strangers?" Cal kept his eyes on the road, a faint smile playing on his lips. "My mom raised me to believe kindness doesn't need a reason. She'd say it's the one thing you can give away and still keep." Eve turned to look at him, her expression softening. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Cal said, his voice dropping a notch. "Gone 3 years now, but she's still the voice in my head most days." Eve didn't reply right away, but he felt her gaze linger, warm and searching. The truck rolled into Dusty Hollow. As the last light faded from the sky, the sleepy town glowing faintly under a scattering of stars, Cal pulled up to his shop, a weathered building with a sign that read Wheeler's Garage, and cut the engine. "Here we are," he said, stepping out. "Home, sweet home." Eve climbed down, her boots crunching on the gravel. She looked at the garage, then back at him, a question in her eyes she didn't voice. "Thanks, Cal," she said instead. "For everything." "Don't mention it," he replied, unhooking the bike. "Let's get Blackbird inside. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." As they wheeled the motorcycle through the door, the night settled around them, thick with the promise of something unspoken. Cal didn't know it yet, but the woman standing beside him was about to turn his world upside down, and he was about to do the same for her. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead as Cal wheeled Blackbird into the heart of Wheeler's garage. The air smelled of oil and metal, a comforting blend that had been his sanctuary since he was a boy, trailing after his father with a socket wrench too big for his hands. Now at 35, the garage was more than a livelihood. It was a refuge from a world that had taken too much and given too little. He parked the motorcycle beside a workbench cluttered with tools, then turned to Eve, who stood near the door, her silhouette framed by the dim glow of the street lamp outside. "Welcome to my castle," Cal said with a wry smile, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "Not much, but it gets the job done." Eve stepped forward, her boots echoing softly on the concrete floor. She ran a finger along the edge of a dusty shelf, her eyes tracing the space with a curiosity that felt almost personal. "It's honest," she said, her voice low but clear. "You don't see that much anymore," Cal chuckled, tossing the rag onto the bench. "Honest's about all I've got. You thirsty? I've got water, coffee, or—" He paused, rummaging in a mini fridge tucked in the corner. "One very questionable beer that's been here since the 4th of July. Water's fine," Eve replied, her lips twitching into a half-smile that softened the sharpness of her features. She took the bottle he offered, their fingers brushing for a fleeting second. The contact sent a jolt through Cal, not electric, but warm, like the first sip of coffee on a cold morning. He pulled back, busying himself with inspecting Blackbird, to hide the flush creeping up his neck. "So," he said, crouching beside the bike, "what's a gal like you doing out on Route 66 with a machine like this? You don't strike me as the Sunday rider type." Eve leaned against the workbench, cradling the water bottle. "I like the road," she said simply. "The wind, the quiet, it's freeing." She hesitated, as if weighing how much more to give away, then added, "I've been riding for a while now." "Just me and Blackbird." Cal nodded, peering at the charred fuel line. "Sounds lonely." "Sometimes," she admitted, her gaze drifting to the floor. "But it's better than where I was." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. Cal wanted to press, to ask where was, but something in her tone, a quiet ache, told him to let it lie. Instead, he straightened up, brushing his hands on his jeans. "Well, you're here now, and Blackbird's in good hands. I'll need a day or two to fix her up. Parts are tricky to come by for a beauty like this." Eve's eyes flicked to the bike, then back to him. "You sure about the no-charge thing? I can pay. I don't like owing people." "You don't owe me a damn thing," Cal said, his voice firm but kind. "I fix what's broken, that's what I do. Call it a habit." She studied him again, that same searching look from the roadside, like she was trying to solve a puzzle, with pieces missing. "You're a rare breed, Cal Wheeler," she said at last, and there was a warmth in her tone that caught him off guard. He shrugged, turning to grab a wrench to cover the sudden tightness in his chest. Just a guy with a toolbox and too much time on his hands. But as he said it, he felt the lie. Time was the one thing he didn't have enough of. Not since his mom passed, leaving him alone with the ghosts of Dusty Hollow. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Cal tinkering with the bike while Eve watched, occasionally handing him a tool when he pointed. She moved with an ease that surprised him, like she'd spent time around engines before, though she didn't say as much. The quiet stretched, broken only by the clink of metal and the hum of the lights, until Eve spoke again. "Your mom," she said, her voice tentative. "She taught you to help people like this?" Cal paused, the wrench still in his hand. He didn't talk about his mom much, not because it hurt, but because it felt too big to fit into words. "Yeah," he said finally, setting the tool down. "She was the kind who'd give you her last dollar and then figure out how to stretch a loaf of bread for a week. Cancer took her 3 years back. Took my dad a decade before that in a wreck out on 66. Guess I'm still trying to live up to them." Eve's face softened, and for a moment he thought she might reach out. She didn't, but her eyes held his with a gentleness that felt like a touch. "I'm sorry," she said. "They sound like good people." "The best," Cal replied, his throat tight. He cleared it, forcing a grin. "What about you? Got folks wondering where you are?" Her expression flickered, something dark and fleeting, like a cloud passing over the sun. "Not anymore," she said, and the finality in her voice shut the door on that line of questions. She took a sip of water, then set the bottle down with a deliberate thud. "You live around here?" "Upstairs," Cal said, jerking a thumb toward a narrow staircase in the corner. "Not exactly a penthouse, but it's home. You got a place to crash tonight?" Eve hesitated, her fingers tightening around the bottle. "I was planning to ride on, find a motel or something." "Not much out there this time of night," he said, glancing at the clock. "Nearly 9. There's a cot in the back if you want it. Clean, I promise. Beats sleeping on the side of the road." She opened her mouth, likely to protest, but then closed it, nodding instead. "Thanks, Cal. Really. Don't mention it," he said, heading toward the back to fetch a blanket. As he rummaged in a storage closet, he heard her footsteps behind him, light but steady. He turned, handing her the blanket, a faded quilt his mom had made years ago, and pointed to a small room off the garage. "It's not fancy, but it'll do." Eve took the quilt, her fingers brushing the worn fabric with a reverence that surprised him. "It's perfect," she said, and the sincerity in her voice hit him square in the chest. He left her to settle in, climbing the stairs to his own cramped apartment above the shop. The night was still, the only sound the faint creak of the building settling. But as he lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, Cal couldn't shake the feeling that Eve Marshall was more than a stranded biker. There was a story behind those. Green eyes, a big one, and for reasons he couldn't name, he wanted to hear it. Downstairs, Eve lay on the cot, clutching the quilt, her own thoughts a tangle of gratitude and secrets she wasn't ready to unravel. The garage was quiet, but something had shifted in the air, a spark waiting to catch. The morning sun crept through the smudged windows of Wheeler's garage, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Cal woke early, as he always did, the familiar ache in his back a reminder of too many nights on a lumpy mattress. Downstairs, the air was still, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft rustle of movement from the back room. Eve was awake. He could hear her, quiet footsteps, the creak of the cot, and for a moment he stood at the top of the stairs, wondering what it meant to have someone else in his space after so long alone. He descended slowly, his boots heavy on the wooden steps, and found her standing by Blackbird, her fingers tracing the curve of the handlebars. She'd pulled her hair into a loose braid, and in the morning light she looked younger, softer, though that air of mystery still clung to her like a second skin. "Morning," Cal said, his voice gravelly from sleep. Eve glanced up, her green eyes catching the light. "Morning. Hope I didn't wake you." "Nah," he said, crossing to the coffee pot in the corner. "I'm up with the birds most days. Coffee?" "Please," she replied, offering a small smile that felt like a truce between strangers. He poured 2 mugs, handing her one, and they stood there, the warmth of the ceramic seeping into their hands as the silence stretched. Cal took a sip, then nodded toward the bike. "Got a plan for her today. Need to order a new fuel line, but I can patch her up enough to run. You in a hurry to get somewhere?" Eve hesitated, her gaze dropping. "To the mug." "Not really," she said almost too casually. "I've got time." He raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Instead, he set his coffee down and grabbed a toolbox, settling beside Blackbird with the ease of a man who'd spent half his life under engines. "All right then. Let's see what we can do." They fell into a rhythm, much like the night before. Cal working, Eve watching, occasionally handing him a tool when he grunted a request. But today there was a shift. She asked questions, small ones at first, about spark plugs and carburetors, her voice laced with a curiosity that hinted at more than passing interest. "You ever ride?" he asked, glancing up from the tangle of wires. "Since I was a kid," she said, a flicker of nostalgia crossing her face. "My uncle had a Harley, taught me on back roads up north, said it was the closest thing to flying without leaving the ground." Cal grinned, wiping grease from his hands. He wasn't wrong. "I wanted to fly once. Real flying, I mean, planes. Signed up for lessons when I was 19, but life had other plans." "What happened?" Eve asked, leaning forward slightly, her mug forgotten on the bench. He shrugged, but the weight of the memory pressed down on him. "Dad died in a crash out on 66. Drunk driver took him out. Mom got sick not long after. Someone had to keep the shop going, pay the bills. Dreams don't mean much when the people you love need you." Eve's expression softened, a quiet understanding passing between them. "You gave up a lot." "Didn't feel like giving up at the time," he said, his voice steady but low. "Just felt like the right thing to do." She nodded, and for a moment they sat with that truth, the garage a cocoon around them. Then she surprised him. "I get it," she said, her tone almost confessional. "Running towards something or away from it doesn't always look like you expect." Cal looked at her, really looked, and saw the cracks in her armor, tiny fractures that hinted at a story she wasn't ready to tell. "What are you running from, Eve?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Her breath caught, and she turned away, staring at Blackbird like it held the answer. "It's not running," she said finally. "It's searching for something real." He didn't press, though the urge burned in his chest. Instead, he stood, brushing his hands on his jeans. "Well, you're here now. That's real enough. For today, come on, let's take a break. I owe you breakfast." She followed him out to the truck, the morning air crisp and laced with the scent of prairie grass. They drove to Millie's Diner, a weathered joint on the edge of Dusty Hollow, where the coffee was strong and the pancakes were legendary. Millie herself, a stout woman in her 60s with a smoker's rasp, greeted Cal with a familiar nod. "Who's this?" she asked, eyeing Eve with the curiosity of a small-town gatekeeper. "Eve," Cal said, sliding into a booth. "Her bike broke down. I'm fixing it." Millie raised an eyebrow, setting down 2 menus. "You're a saint, Cal Wheeler. Don't let him fool you, hun. He's got a heart bigger than his head." Eve smiled, a real one this time, and Cal felt a flush creep up his neck again. They ordered pancakes for him, eggs for her, and as Millie shuffled off, Eve leaned back, studying him. "She's right, you know. You're kind of a unicorn out here." "Just a guy who likes pancakes," he said, deflecting with a grin. But her words stuck, stirring something he hadn't felt in years, a flicker of pride, maybe, or hope. The food came, and they ate in easy silence until Millie returned with the coffee pot. "You passing through, Eve?" she asked, refilling their mugs. "Something like that," Eve replied, her voice tightening just enough for Cal to notice. "She's staying till the bike's fixed," he cut in, earning a grateful glance from Eve. Millie hummed, unconvinced, and left them to their meal. Back at the garage, the day slipped by in a blur of repairs and small talk. By late afternoon, Cal had the fuel line patched, and Blackbird roared to life with a throaty growl that made Eve's eyes light up. "You're a miracle worker," she said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Just a mechanic," he corrected, but her praise warmed him more than he'd admit. As the sun dipped low, casting golden streaks through the windows, Eve turned to him, her expression shifting, serious, almost vulnerable. "Cal," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something." He froze, the wrench in his hand forgotten. "Yeah?" She took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto his. "My name's Evelyn Marshall, and I'm not just some biker. I used to be someone else, someone with a lot of money and a lot of baggage." The confession hung in the air, a spark igniting a fire Cal hadn't seen coming. He stared at her, heart thudding, knowing this was the moment everything changed, and wondering just how deep her story went. The words hung in the garage like dust motes, caught in a shaft of fading sunlight. Evelyn Marshall, not just Eve, not just a biker with a broken-down ride, stood before Cal, her confession ringing in his ears. Money, baggage, the weight of... It settled over him as he set the wrench down, its clatter against the workbench louder than it should have been. He looked at her, really looked, and saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her green eyes darted to the floor as if she'd just handed him a burden she wasn't sure he'd carry. "Money and baggage," Cal repeated, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. "That's a hell of a way to introduce yourself twice." Eve let out a breath, half a laugh, and ran a hand through her braid, loosening a few strands. "I didn't mean to drop it like that. I don't know. You've been straight with me, Cal. Felt wrong not to give you something back." He leaned against the bench, crossing his arms, his hazel eyes searching hers. "All right. So, who's Evelyn Marshall? The real one, not the one standing here with grease on her jeans." She hesitated, then stepped closer to Blackbird, resting a hand on the seat like it was an anchor. "Evelyn Marshall is a name tied to a fortune I didn't earn. My dad built a tech empire out west. Silicon Valley stuff, software, apps, things that made him a billionaire before I was out of high school. When he died 5 years ago, it all fell to me. The money, the company, the expectations. I ran it for a while, tried to anyway, but it wasn't me." Cal tilted his head, piecing it together. So you traded boardrooms for back roads? Something like that, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I sold my shares and kept enough to live on and hit the road. People think money solves everything, but it weighed me down. I wanted to feel light again, real. He nodded, understanding more than he expected to. And the baggage? Her smile faded, and she looked away, out the window where the prairie stretched endless and gold under the setting sun. The baggage is what I left behind, a life I didn't fit into, people who wanted me to be someone I'm not. I've been, writing ever since, trying to figure out who I am when the world isn't watching. Cal let that sink in, the quiet stretching between them like the horizon outside. He'd known she was running from something. Hell, he'd felt it the moment he saw her on Route 66. But this, a billionaire's daughter shedding her skin, it was a bigger story than he'd bargained for, yet it didn't change how he saw her. Not really. She was still Eve, the woman who'd fought a fire with her jacket, who'd handed him a wrench like she belonged here. You don't have to carry it alone, you know, he said finally, his voice soft but firm. The baggage. I mean, not saying I've got all the answers, but I've hauled my share of heavy stuff. She turned back to him, her eyes shimmering with something, gratitude maybe, or relief. You're too good, Cal Wheeler, you know that? Nah, he said, brushing it off with a grin. Just stubborn. Come on, sun's going down. Let's get out of here for a bit. He led her outside, grabbing a couple of old camp chairs from the garage and setting them up behind the shop where a patch of prairie grass met the edge of town. The sky was ablaze with pinks and oranges, the kind of sunset that made you believe in second chances. They sat, the silence between them. Comfortable now, the weight of her words settling into something they could both hold. Mom used to bring me out here, Cal said after a while, his voice low as the evening breeze rustled the grass. After Dad died, she'd sit me down with a thermos of hot chocolate and tell me the world was still good, even when it didn't. Wouldn't feel like it. Said the prairie had a way of whispering hope if you listened. Eve tilted her head, watching him. Did you believe her? Most days, he admitted. Some days it's harder, but sitting here, yeah, I can hear it. She smiled, a real one that reached her eyes and leaned back in her chair. I like that, whispering hope. I could use some of that. They sat there as the colors bled into dusk, the stars winking awake one by one. Cal felt a pull toward her. Not just the pull of a pretty face, but something deeper, like two souls brushing edges in the dark. He didn't know her whole story yet, but he wanted to, and that scared him a little, because wanting anything after so long felt like waking up a part of himself he'd buried with his parents. Then came the surprise. A low rumble in the distance, growing louder until a pickup truck crested the hill, its headlights slicing through the twilight. Cal squinted, recognizing the beat-up Chevy that belonged to Tommy Ruiz, a local kid who'd been his shadow since he was 12. Now 19, Tommy worked odd jobs around town, his wiry frame and quick grin, a fixture in Dusty Hollow. The truck rolled to a stop, and Tommy hopped out, his dark hair a mess under a backward cap. Cal, been looking for you, man. Millie said you'd be here. He paused, spotting Eve, and his grin widened. Whoa, didn't know you had company. Tommy, this is Eve, Cal said, standing. Her bike's in the shop. Eve, this is Tommy, my unofficial apprentice. Hey, Tommy said, tipping his cap with exaggerated charm. Nice to meet you. Cal's the best, you know. Fixed my mom's car last month for free when she couldn't pay. Eve smiled, glancing at Cal. I'm starting to see a pattern. Cal waved it off, but Tommy wasn't done. Got a problem? And though old man Jenkins blew a tire out by the creek and he's stuck, needs a tow. I'd do it, but my rig's in the shop, alternator's shot. Cal sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, I'll grab the tow truck. Eve, you good here? I'll come, she said, standing before he could argue. I've got nothing else going on, and I owe you one. Tommy raised an eyebrow, but Cal just nodded, a flicker of warmth in his chest. "Fair enough. Let's roll." They piled into Cal's tow truck, Eve in the middle, Tommy chattering about Jenkins' legendary temper, and headed out into the night. As the headlights cut through the dark, Cal stole a glance at Eve, her profile steady and calm beside him. She'd given him a piece of herself today, and he'd taken it without judgment. Maybe that's what hope sounded like out here. Not a whisper, but an echo, bouncing back louder with every mile. The tow truck rattled along the narrow dirt road leading to Jenkins Creek, its headlights carving a tunnel through the inky darkness of the prairie night. Cal gripped the wheel, the familiar hum of the engine a steady pulse beneath Tommy's, chatter and Eve's quiet presence beside him. She sat between them, her shoulder brushing his with every bump, a closeness that felt both accidental and deliberate. The air in the cab was thick with the scent of gasoline and the faint tang of her leather jacket, and Cal found himself hyper-aware of her steady breathing, the way her fingers tapped lightly on her knee. "Old man Jenkins is going to be pissed," Tommy said, leaning forward with a grin. "Last time his tire blew, he cussed me out for 20 minutes straight, said I should have fixed the road myself." Cal chuckled, the sound low and warm. "Jenkins cusses out the wind when it blows. Too hard." "Don't take it personal," Eve smirked, glancing between them. "Sounds like a character." "Oh, he's a whole novel," Tommy replied, launching into a tale of Jenkins' latest rant about the postal service. Cal let the kid talk, grateful for the distraction. Eve's confession from earlier still echoed in his mind. A fortune I didn't earn, a life I didn't fit into. And he couldn't shake the feeling that she'd handed him a piece of herself she rarely shared. It made him want to give something back, though he wasn't sure what he had left to offer. They reached the creek, a shallow ribbon of water glinting under the moon, where Jenkins's rusted Ford sat crooked on the shoulder, one tire shredded to ribbons. The old man stood beside it, a lantern in one hand, his weathered face set in a scowl that could curdle milk. "Took you long enough, Wheeler," he barked as Cal cut the engine and stepped out. "Evening to you too, Jenkins," Cal said, unfazed, grabbing his tow kit from the truck bed. "Let's get you sorted." Even Tommy climbed out behind him, and Jenkins' eyes narrowed at the sight of her. "Who's this? Don't tell me you're hiring help now." "She's a friend," Cal said, keeping it simple. "Eve. Meet. A Miss Jenkins. A Miss Eve's just along for the ride." Jenkins grunted, sizing her up. "Hope you're tougher than you look, girl. This ain't no place for city folk." Eve met his gaze, unflinching. "I've handled worse than a flat tire, Mr. Jenkins. Don't worry about me." The old man huffed, but a flicker of respect crossed his face before he turned back to Cal. "Well, get on with it. I ain't got all night." Cal set to work, hooking the Ford to the tow truck with practiced ease, while Tommy held the lantern and Eve watched, her arms crossed against the chill. The night was quiet, save for the rustle of grass and the occasional croak of a frog, and Cal felt a strange peace settle over him. 3 people in his orbit, each carrying their own weight, yet here they were, sharing it for a moment. As he tightened the tow chain, Eve stepped closer, her voice low. "You're good at this, fixing things, people." He glanced up, caught off guard by the softness in her tone. "Just doing what I know," he said, but her words lingered, stirring a warmth he hadn't felt in years. The job done, Jenkins climbed into the cab with a grumble, muttering about the cost of tires, while Cal drove them back to town. Eve stayed quiet, her eyes on the road, but her presence beside him felt like a tether, a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. They dropped Jenkins off at his ramshackle house on the edge of Dusty Hollow, the old man tossing Cal a crumpled 20 before stomping inside. "Generous tonight," Tommy quipped, pocketing the bill Cal handed him. "See you tomorrow, boss." "Yeah," Cal said. "Get some rest." Tommy waved and jogged off toward home, leaving Cal and Eve alone in the truck. The silence stretched, heavy with the day's revelations, until Cal turned to her. You didn't have to come. Most folks would have stayed back. I wanted to, she said, meeting his gaze. You make it look easy, helping people. I'm not used to that. He shrugged, starting the engine. It's not always easy. Just feels right. They drove back to the garage, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. But as they pulled into the lot, a flicker of movement caught Cal's eye. A shadow near the shop door, quick and deliberate. He tensed, cutting. The headlights. Stay here, he said, his voice low. Eve frowned, peering into the dark. What is it? Not sure, he muttered, grabbing a flashlight from the glove box. He stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots, and aimed the beam toward the door. The light caught a figure. A man in a dark coat, his face obscured. By a hood, slipping around the corner of the building. Hey! Cal called, striding forward, but the figure bolted, disappearing into the shadows beyond the garage. He gave chase for a few yards, then stopped, his breath visible in the cool air. Whoever it was, they were gone. Eve was beside him now, her eyes wide but steady. Who was that? No idea, Cal said, scanning the darkness. Kids, maybe. Happens sometimes, teenagers messing around, but that didn't feel right. She touched his arm, her fingers light but firm. You okay? Yeah, he said, though his pulse still raced. Just don't like surprises. They headed inside, locking the door behind them, and Cal checked the garage. Nothing missing, nothing broken. Still, the unease lingered, a ripple in the calm he'd felt all day. Eve watched him, her expression unreadable, until she broke the silence. Cal, there's something else I didn't tell you. He turned, the flashlight still in his hand. What? She took a deep breath, her voice steady but laced with something raw. The money I kept, it's not just mine. There's people who think I owe them, people who might look for me. The words hit him like a punch, and he lowered the light, his mind racing. You mean that guy? I don't know. She cut in, her eyes pleading. Maybe it's nothing, but I couldn't keep it from you, not after tonight. Cal stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. She wasn't just running from a past, she was running from a threat, one that might have followed her here. And yet, standing, there in his garage, her braid frayed and her hands trembling just enough to notice, she looked stronger than ever. He stepped closer, his voice firm. Whatever it is, Eve, we'll figure it out. You're not alone in this. Her eyes shimmered, and she nodded, a fragile trust blooming between them. Outside, the night pressed against the windows, hiding. Secrets neither of them could yet see, but inside, a bond was forming, forged in kindness and tempered by the unknown. The garage felt smaller after Eve's words, the air thick with the unspoken. Cal stood there, flashlight still dangling in his hand, its beam cutting a faint circle on the concrete floor. Her admission, people who might look for me, echoed. In his mind, stirring a protective instinct he hadn't tapped since his mom's final days. He looked at Eve, her green eyes wide but resolute, and saw a woman caught between running and standing her ground. Whatever she'd left behind, it wasn't done with her yet. You want to tell me more? He asked, his voice low, steady, like he was coaxing a skittish engine back to life. Eve shook her head, her braids swaying slightly. Not tonight. I don't even know if it's real. Just a feeling. But I needed you to know. He nodded, setting the flashlight down. Fair enough. You're safe here, Eve. That's what matters. She offered a small, grateful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Thanks, Cal. I mean it. He waved it off, locking the garage door tighter than usual before leading her to the cot in the back. Get some sleep. We'll sort it out in the morning. But as he climbed the stairs to his apartment, sleep felt a million miles away. He lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, the creak of the old building mixing with the thud of his own heartbeat. Who was after her? Debt collectors? Family? Something worse? And why did it feel like his quiet life was unraveling with every minute she stayed? Morning broke grey and heavy, clouds rolling in from the west like a promise of trouble. Cal found Eve already up, sitting by Blackbird with a mug of coffee, her leather jacket draped over the workbench. "Storm's coming," she said, glancing out the window as he joined her. "Looks like it," he replied, pouring himself a cup. "Good day to stay inside. I'll call around for that fuel line today, get Blackbird back on her feet." She nodded, but her eyes were distant, fixed on the gathering clouds. "Cal, about last night." "Don't," he cut in gently. "You don't owe me an explanation, not till you're ready." Her shoulders relaxed, and she took a sip of coffee, the silence between them soft but charged. They spent the morning in the garage, Cal on the phone with suppliers, while Eve tinkered with a set of old tools, her hands moving with a quiet confidence that surprised him. She wasn't just a rider, she knew her way around a machine, and that made him wonder again about the life she'd left behind. By noon, the sky was a bruised purple, and rain began to tap against the roof, a steady rhythm that cocooned them. In the shop, Cal hung up from his last call. Parts were on the way, due tomorrow, and turned to Eve. "You hungry? I make a mean grilled cheese." She grinned, a spark of lightness breaking through her guarded demeanor. "Lead the way, chef." Upstairs, his tiny kitchen was a museum of mismatched dishes and faded linoleum, but it felt alive with her there. They cooked together, Cal flipping sandwiches, Eve slicing a tomato from Millie's last delivery, and the domesticity of it caught him off guard. He hadn't shared a meal like this since his mom, and the ache of that memory mingled with something new, something warm. They ate at the small table by the window, rain streaking the glass as thunder rumbled in the distance. "This is good," Eve said, biting into her sandwich. "You're full of surprises." "Years of practice," he said with a chuckle. "Mom taught me, said a man who can't cook is only half a man." "She was right," Eve replied, her tone softening. "You talk about her a lot." "She's hard to forget," he admitted, setting his plate down. "Kept me going when I didn't want to. You got someone like that?" Her smile faded and she looked out at the storm. "My uncle, maybe. The one with the Harley. He was the only one who didn't care about the money. Taught me to ride, to breathe. He's gone now, heart attack, couple years back." "I'm sorry," Cal said, and he meant it. "Sounds like he was a good man." "The best," she whispered, then shook her head as if clearing a fog. "What about you? Ever think about leaving this place?" "Sometimes," he said, leaning back, "but Dusty Hollow's home. It's where they were. Mom, Dad. Feels like leaving them if I go." She nodded, understanding in her eyes, and they sat there, the storm a backdrop to their quiet connection. But the peace shattered with a sharp bang, the garage door rattling, as if struck by something heavy. Cal was on his feet in an instant, Eve right behind him. Downstairs, rain lashed the windows, and the door shook again. Not the wind, but a deliberate force. Cal grabbed a crowbar from the bench, his pulse racing. "Stay back," he told Eve, but she stepped forward, her jaw set. "No way," she said, grabbing a wrench. "If it's trouble, we face it together." He didn't argue. There wasn't time. He flung the door open, rain soaking him instantly, and saw it. A black SUV parked across the lot, its headlights off, two figures in dark coats standing beside it. One held a tire iron, the other a phone, their faces shadowed by hoods. "Hey!" Cal shouted, stepping into the storm, crowbar raised. "What the hell do you want?" The figures froze, then bolted for the SUV as thunder cracked overhead. The engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel as they peeled out into the night. Cal started after them, but Eve grabbed his arm. "Don't! They're gone!" He turned, rain dripping from his hair, adrenaline pumping. "Who were they, Eve? Tell me straight." She shivered, soaked and pale, but her voice was steady. "I don't know for sure. Could be nothing. Could be someone from my old life. Creditors, maybe. My dad owed people when he died. I thought I'd settled it, but they found you," he finished, his grip tightening on the crowbar. "Why didn't you say it was this bad?" "I didn't know," she said, her eyes pleading. "I swear, Cal, I thought I'd outrun it." He stared at her, the storm raging around them, and felt a surge of something fierce. Anger, yes, but mostly a need to shield her. "You're not running anymore," he said, his voice cutting through the rain. "Not alone. We'll deal with this together." She nodded, rain mixing with the tears she didn't bother to hide, and they stumbled back inside, dripping and shaken. As they stood there, breathless, Cal realized this wasn't just about fixing a bike or helping a stranger anymore. It was about standing firm, about choosing someone worth fighting for. And in that moment, with the storm howling outside, he knew he'd already made his choice. The storm battered Wheeler's garage through the night, a relentless drumbeat of rain and wind that seemed to mirror the turmoil in Cal's chest. He and Eve had retreated inside, soaked to the bone, the echo of the fleeing SUV still ringing in their ears. Now, as the first grey light of dawn seeped through the windows, the world outside was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of wet earth. Cal stood by the coffee pot, pouring 2 mugs, while Eve sat on the cot, wrapped in his mom's old quilt, her damp hair clinging to her face. "You didn't sleep," she said, her voice soft but sure, as he handed her a mug. He shrugged, settling onto a stool across from her. "Couldn't. Kept thinking about that SUV. You?" "Same," she admitted, cradling the coffee. "I'm sorry, Cal. I didn't mean to drag you into this." "You didn't drag me anywhere," he said, his tone firm but kind. "I chose to be here, still do." Her eyes met his, shimmering with something raw, gratitude maybe, or trust, and she nodded, a silent pact forming between them. They sipped, their coffee in the stillness, the garage a fortress against whatever lurked beyond. But Cal's mind churned. Creditors, thugs, whoever they were, they'd found Eve in Dusty Hollow, a speck on the map no one should have cared about, and that meant they weren't just chasing money, they were chasing her. "We need a plan," he said finally, setting his mug down. "If they're bold enough to show up here, they'll be back. You can't keep running blind." Eve's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. "I know. I don't know where to start. I thought I'd paid off my dad's debts, sold everything, settled what I could. But he was messy, Cal. Left deals I didn't even know about." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then we dig. Figure out who's after you, what they want. I've got friends around here. Tommy's mum works at the bank. Millie here's. Everything. We'll find something." She smiled faintly, a flicker of hope breaking through. "You're making this sound like a detective novel." "Maybe it is," he said with a grin. "But I'm not letting you play the damsel. You're and tougher than that." Her laugh was small but real, and it warmed him more than the coffee. They finished their drinks, and as the rain tapered off, Cal got to work on Blackbird, installing the patched fuel line while Eve paced, her energy restless but focused. By mid-morning the clouds parted, and sunlight spilled across the prairie, turning puddles into mirrors of the sky. "Let's get some air," Cal suggested, wiping his hands. "Clear our heads." They stepped outside, the world fresh and glistening, and walked to the edge of town, where the creek ran slow and steady. The water reflected the blue above, and Cal felt a pang of memory, his mom wading in that creek with him splashing and laughing like the world couldn't touch them. He glanced at Eve, her face tipped toward the sun, and wondered if she'd ever had moments like that, untouched by the weight she carried. "You ever fish?" he asked, breaking the quiet. She raised an eyebrow. "Not since I was a kid. Why?" He grinned, jogging back to the garage and returning with 2 old rods and a tin of worms he kept for lazy days. "No better way to think than with a line in the water." "Come on." They set up on the bank, casting their lines into the creek, the gentle plink of the hooks, a soothing counterpoint to the night's chaos. Eve fumbled at first, her cast awkward, but Cal guided her with a patience that felt natural. "There you go," he said as her lines sailed smooth. "You're a natural." "Hardly," she said, but she smiled, settling beside him on the grass. They sat there, rods in hand, the silence companionable, until she spoke again. This feels normal. I haven't had normal in a long time. Normal's underrated, Cal replied, reeling in his line. Took me years to figure that out. She nodded, her gaze on the water. I used to think I needed more. Bigger. Better. But out here, with you, it's enough. The words hit him square, a quiet confession that made his chest ache. He wanted to say something back, to tell her she was enough too, but before he could, a shout broke the stillness. Tommy, sprinting toward them from the road, his cap askew. Cal! Eve! He panted, skidding to a stop. You gotta see this. They dropped their rods and followed him back to the garage, where Tommy pointed to a folded note tucked under the windshield wiper of Cal's truck. Cal's stomach sank as he pulled it free, the paper damp but legible. In sharp, blocky letters it read, Evelyn Marshall, we know where you are. Pay up or we come back. Eve's face drained of color, her hands curling into fists. They were... Here, while we were gone. Cal crumpled the note, anger flaring hot and fast. Bastards, they're playing games. Tommy shifted, uneasy. I saw a black car peel out when I was coming over. Didn't think much of it till now. What's going on, Cal? Trouble from Eve's past, he said, keeping it short. Tommy, do me a favor. Tell your mom to check the bank records. Anything tied to Marshall Tech. Debts, loans, whatever she can find. Discreetly. Tommy nodded, wide-eyed but determined. Got it. You okay, Eve? I will be, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Thanks, Tommy. He took off, leaving them alone with the note and the weight it carried. Cal turned to Eve, his jaw tight. This ends now. We're not waiting for them to come back. We're taking the fight to them. She blinked, startled. Cal, you don't have to. I do, he cut in, stepping closer. You're not just some stranger I pulled off the road anymore. You're here, with me, and I'm not letting anyone hurt you. Not while I've got breath in me. Her eyes searched his, and then she did something unexpected. She reached out, her hand finding his, her fingers cold but firm. Okay, she whispered. Together. He squeezed her hand, the contact grounding them both, and in that moment the fear gave way to something stronger. Resolve, trust, a spark that had been building since that first flame on Route 66. The sun climbed higher, bathing Dusty Hollow in light, and Cal knew this was more than a rescue now. It was a stand, a promise, and maybe, just maybe, a chance at something he'd stopped believing in long ago. The sun hung high over Dusty Hollow, its light piercing the last of the storm's haze, but the warmth couldn't touch the chill that lingered in Cal's gut. He stood in the garage, the crumpled note from the windshield still clenched in his fist, its sharp edges digging into his palm. Eve paced beside Blackbird, her boots scuffing the concrete, her face a mask of determination tinged with fear. The words, "Pay up or we come back," were a gauntlet thrown down, and Cal felt the weight of it settle over them both. "We need to move fast," he said, tossing the note onto the workbench. "They know this place now. Staying put's not an option." Eve stopped, turning to him, her green eyes sharp. "Move where? I've been running for months, Cal. Hiding doesn't work. They keep finding me." "Then we don't hide," he replied, his voice steady but fierce. "We find them first. Figure out who they are, what they want, and end this." She stared at him, a flicker of doubt crossing her face, but it softened into something else. Trust, maybe, or hope. "You really think we can?" "I know we can," he said, stepping closer. "You're not alone anymore, Eve. We've got people here, Tommy, Millie, folks who'll back us up. And I'm not letting some shadows in a black SUV dictate your life." Her lips parted, then closed, and she nodded, a resolve settling over her like armor. "Okay. Where do we start?" Cal grabbed his phone, dialing Tommy's number. "With what we've got, Tommy's mom might have something by now. Let's see what she's dug up." The call connected, and Tommy's voice crackled through, breathless. "Cal, was just about to call you. Mom's got a lead, some old loan. Tied to Marshall Tech. Big one, too. Says it's flagged with a collections agency out of Chicago. Shady as hell." "Chicago," Cal repeated, glancing at Eve. Her face tightened, a shadow of recognition passing over it. "What's the agency?" "North Lake Recovery," Tommy said. "Mom says they're known for strong-arm stuff. Harassment, threats. You think that's who's after Eve?" "Sounds like it," Cal said, his jaw clenching. "Thanks, Tommy. Tell your mom to keep it quiet. We don't want this spreading." "On it," Tommy replied, then hesitated. "You need me there?" "Not yet," Cal said. "Stay with your mom. We'll holler if we need backup." He hung up, turning to Eve. "North Lake Recovery. Ring any bells?" She exhaled, running, a hand through her hair. "Maybe. Dad had dealings in Chicago, big investors, shady ones. I thought I'd cleared it all when I sold out, but if they're still coming, it's personal now." "Personal or not, they're breaking laws." Cal said, "Harassment's no joke, we can use that." Eve nodded, but her eyes were distant, lost in a memory she didn't share. Cal let it be, focusing instead on the next step. "We'll head to Millie's," he said. "She's got ears everywhere. Might have heard something about strangers in town." They grabbed their jackets and drove the short distance to the diner, the truck's engine a low growl against the quiet afternoon. Millie's was half full, the lunchtime crowd a mix of regulars nursing coffee and pie. Millie spotted them from behind the counter, her sharp eyes narrowing as they slid into "A booth. You two look like you've seen a ghost," she said, setting down 2 mugs without asking. "What's up?" Cal leaned in, keeping his voice low. "Trouble, Millie. Someone's after Eve. Left a note last night, been sniffing around. You hear anything about strangers lately?" Millie's face hardened, her smoker's rasp dropping. To a whisper, "Heard a couple rough types were at the gas station yesterday. Out-of-towners, fancy car, asked about a woman on a bike. Didn't think much of it till now." Eve tensed beside him, her fingers tightening around the mug. "What did they look like?" "Tall, mean mugs," Millie said. "One had a scar on his cheek, real ugly. Didn't stick around long. Paid cash and peeled out." "Sounds like..." "Our guys," Cal said, his mind racing. "Thanks, Millie. Keep it under your hat, all right?" "Always do," she replied, tapping the counter before heading back to the kitchen. Eve stared into her coffee, her voice barely audible. "They're closer than I thought." "They're sloppy too," Cal said, his tone firm. "Asking around. A small town. That's a mistake. We've got the upper hand here." She looked up, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "What's the play?" "We go to them," he said, the idea taking shape as he spoke. "Chicago's a haul, but if we can track North Lake down, confront them on their turf, legal or not, they'll back off. I've got a buddy up there, ex-cop. He'll know how to handle this." Eve blinked, startled. "You'd go all the way to Chicago for me?" "For us," he corrected, meeting her gaze. "This isn't just your fight anymore." Her breath hitched, and for a moment the diner faded, the clatter of plates, the hum of voices, leaving just the 2 of them. Then came the surprise. The bell above the door jingled, and Tommy burst in, his face flushed with urgency. "Cal!" he panted, sliding into the booth. "You're not going to believe this. Mom found more. That loan? It's not just debt. There's a lien on some property Marshall Tech owned, a warehouse, and get this, it's still in Eve's name." Eve's eyes widened, her mug clattering to the table. "What? I sold everything, I made sure of it. Looks like you missed." "On," Tommy said, pulling a crumpled printout from his pocket. "North Lake's claiming it's collateral. They're saying you owe $10 million or they take it. And they're not waiting for paperwork." Cal snatched the paper, scanning the details. A derelict warehouse on Chicago's south side, tied to a loan Eve's father had buried in shell companies. $10 million, he muttered. "That's why they're desperate. This isn't just harassment, it's a shakedown." Eve pressed a hand to her forehead, reeling. "I didn't know. Dad never told me." "We'll fix it," Cal said, his voice cutting through her panic. "We've got proof now, something to fight with. We head to Chicago, find that warehouse, and shut this down, legal or otherwise." She looked at him, fear giving way to determination. "You're crazy, you know that?" "Crazy's my specialty," he said with a grin, and Tommy laughed, breaking the tension. "Count me in," Tommy said. "Mom's pissed they're messing with you. She's ready to call the feds herself." Let's hold off on the feds, Cal said. We've got this, for now. As they huddled over the printout, plotting their next move, Cal felt a surge of purpose he hadn't known since his parents' days. An electric certainty that this was right. Eve reached for his hand under the table, her fingers threading. Through his, and he squeezed back a silent vow. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, he wasn't walking it alone. And neither was she. The road to Chicago stretched out like a taut wire, humming with tension beneath the tires of Cal's pickup truck. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift, his eyes flicking between the highway and Eve beside him. She sat with the printout from Tommy's mom crumpled in her lap, her face set in a mix of resolve and unease. Behind them, Blackbird was strapped to the truck bed, its sleek frame a silent witness to the journey they'd begun on Route 66. Tommy had stayed back in Dusty Hollow, tasked with keeping Millie and his mum updated, but his eager good luck still echoed in Cal's ears. They'd left at dawn, the prairie fading into a blur of green and gold as they chased the answers that waited 300 miles north. Cal's buddy, Ray, an ex-cop turned private investigator, had agreed to meet them at a diner on Chicago's south side, near the warehouse tied to Eve's name. The plan was simple: find the property, dig into North Lake Recovery's claim, and confront them with whatever leverage they could muster. Simple, but not easy. Cal felt it in his bones. This wasn't just about a debt anymore. It was about Eve reclaiming her life, and him standing beside her to make it happen. "You're quiet," he said, breaking the hum of the engine after an hour of silence. Eve glanced at him, her green eyes catching the morning light. "Just thinking. About Dad, mostly. He was a genius with tech, but a mess with people. I should have known he'd leave something like this behind." Cal nodded, his grip tightening on the wheel. "Folks don't always see the messes they make till it's too late. Doesn't mean you're stuck cleaning it up forever." She smiled, faintly, a flicker of warmth in the storm of her thoughts. "You sound like you've got experience." "More than I'd like," he admitted, his voice softening. "Mom used to say every mess is a chance to build something better. Took me a while to believe her." "I believe her," Eve said, her tone quiet but sure. "And you." The words settled over him like a balm, easing the knot in his chest. He reached over, resting his hand on hers for a moment, and she didn't pull away. They drove on, the miles peeling back layers of uncertainty, until the skyline of Chicago loomed ahead, steel and glass clawing at the sky, a world so far from Dusty Hollow it felt like another planet. Ray was waiting at the diner, a grizzled man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and a no-nonsense stare. He slid into the booth across from them, a folder tucked under his arm. "Wheeler," he greeted, nodding at Cal, then glancing at Eve. "You must be Evelyn. Heard. You've got some vultures circling." "Something like that," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of his gaze. Ray opened the folder, spreading papers across the table. Deeds, loan agreements, a tangle of legalese Cal could barely parse. "This warehouse," he said, tapping a grainy photo of a squat, rust-streaked building. "It's yours, all right. Buried under a shell company your old man set up. North Lake's got a lien on it. 10 million, like your kid said. But here's the kicker. It's not just a debt. That place is sitting on land zoned for redevelopment, worth triple that if they flip it." Eve's breath caught, her hands clenching the table's edge. "Triple? They're not after the money. They're after the property." "Exactly," Ray said, leaning back. "They're banking on you folding, signing it over to settle." A classic strong-arm play. Cal's jaw tightened, anger simmering low and hot. "So they've been chasing her across the country for a damn real estate grab." "Looks like it," Ray said. "I've got contacts at the precinct. Old buddies. Who owe me. They can pull records, see if North Lake's got a rap sheet we can use. Harassment's one thing, extortion's another." "Do it," Cal said, his voice firm. "We're not letting them win." Ray nodded, jotting a note, then slid the folder to Eve. "You're the key here, Evelyn. You ready to fight? She met his eyes, then Cal's, and nodded. Yeah, we're done running. They left the diner with a plan. Ray would dig deeper while Cal and Eve scoped the warehouse, gathering proof it was still hers. The drive to the south side was tense, the city's pulse a stark contrast to the prairie's stillness. The warehouse loomed at the end of a potholed street, its windows boarded, its walls tagged with graffiti. Cal parked a block away, scanning the area. Quiet, he muttered. Too quiet. Eve grabbed a flashlight from the glove box, her jaw set. Let's go. They slipped inside through a broken door, the air stale and thick with dust. The space was cavernous, littered with rusted machinery and forgotten crates. But it wasn't. Empty, footsteps echoed, sharp, deliberate, and Cal spun, shoving Eve behind a stack of boxes. Two men emerged from the shadows, one with a scar on his cheek, the other hefting a crowbar. Millie's description flashed in Cal's mind. Tall, mean mugs. And his blood ran cold. Well, Scarface said, his voice a low growl. Evelyn Marshall. Thought you'd show eventually. Eve stepped out, her flashlight steady, despite the tremor in her voice. This is my property. You've got no right here. You owe us, Crowbar snapped, advancing. 10 million, or this place. Pick fast. Cal moved in front of her, his fists clenched. She's not picking anything. You're done threatening her. Scarface laughed, a harsh bark, but before he could reply, sirens wailed in the distance, close, closing fast. The men froze, exchanging a glance, then bolted for a side exit as red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Cal grabbed Eve's arm, pulling her back as cops swarmed in. Raise contacts right on time. Stay down, Cal whispered, shielding her as the chaos unfolded. The men didn't get far. Handcuffs clicked, voices barked orders, and within minutes it was over. Ray strode in, a grim smile on his face. Caught 'em trespassing. Got warrants out for extortion too. North Lake's finished. Eve sagged. Against Cal, relief washing over her. It's done, almost, Ray said. Warehouse is yours. Sell it, keep it, whatever. You're free. She turned to Cal, tears brimming but not falling. You did this. We did this, he corrected, his voice thick. Together. As the cops cleared out, Cal pulled her close, her head resting against his chest. The warehouse stood silent now, a relic of a past she'd conquered. Outside, the city buzzed, but in that moment it was just them, two souls who'd faced the fire and walked out stronger, hand in hand. The sun dipped low over Route 66, painting the prairie in hues of amber and rose as Cal's truck rolled back into Dusty Hollow. The journey from Chicago had been quiet, the weight of the warehouse showdown settling into a gentle peace between him and Eve. Blackbird rode securely in the truck bed, her engine patched but her spirit unbroken, a mirror of the woman who'd claimed her. Cal stole a glance at Eve, her face bathed in the soft light, her green eyes reflecting a calm he hadn't seen before. They'd faced the fire together, and now the horizon felt wide open, full of promise. He pulled into the garage lot, cutting. The engine as the familiar silhouette of Wheeler's garage loomed ahead. Tommy was there, leaning against the doorframe with a grin. Millie beside him holding a thermos that Cal knew held her famous hot chocolate. Heard you took down the bad guys, Tommy called, jogging over as they climbed out. Mum's been bragging all day. Says she's a hero for finding that lean. She is, Eve said, her voice warm with gratitude. And you, Tommy. Thank you. Millie stepped forward, pressing the thermos into Eve's hands. You're one of us now, hun. Heroes get cocoa. Cal, you're lucky I saved you some. Cal chuckled, the sound easing the last of his tension. Wouldn't expect less, Millie. They gathered inside, the garage glowing with the flicker of a lantern Tommy had lit, its soft light dancing across the tools and benches. Eve set the thermos down, pouring mugs for everyone, and the simple act felt like a ritual, a homecoming. Cal watched her, marveling at how she fit here, her leather jacket draped over a chair, her hands steady as she passed him a mug. There, fingers brushed, and she smiled. A real unguarded smile that lit up the room more than any lantern could. "So," Millie said, settling onto a stool with a creak, "what's next? You selling that warehouse, Eve?" Eve nodded, sipping her cocoa. "Yeah, Ray's handling the paperwork. Says it'll fetch enough to clear any leftover debts and then some. I don't need it. Never did." "What do you need?" Tommy asked, his curiosity as boundless as ever. She glanced at Cal, her eyes softening. "This. A place to belong. People who don't care about what I used to be." Cal's chest tightened, a swell of something bright and fierce rising in him. He set his mug down, stepping closer. "You've got that here, long as you want it." Her breath caught, and for a moment the world shrank to just them. The clatter of Millie's spoon, Tommy's teasing whistle fading into the background. Then she reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his, and the contact was a quiet vow, a tether stronger than any storm. The evening stretched into night, the four of them talking and laughing over cocoa and Millie's tales of Dusty Hollow's wilder days. But as the stars took over the sky, Cal felt a pull to step outside, to breathe in the moment. He slipped out the back door, Eve following without a word, and they sank into the camp chairs by the prairie's edge, the same spot where he'd shared his mum's wisdom days before. The air was cool, laced with the scent of damp grass, and the silence between them was comfortable, rich with everything they'd been through. Eve tilted her head back, staring at the constellations. "You ever think about how small we are out here?" she asked, her voice low. "Sometimes," Cal said, leaning back beside her. "But then I figure it's not about being big. It's about what you do with the space you've got." She turned to him, her face luminous in the starlight. "You've done a lot with yours, Cal. More than you know." He shrugged, but her words sank deep, stirring a pride he hadn't let himself feel in years. "You too, Eve. That fire on the road. It wasn't just Blackbird burning. It was you breaking free." Here Eve's shimmered and she leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his. "I didn't break free alone. You were there pulling me out. Every step." He met her gaze, his heart thudding steady and sure. "And I'd do it again. Every damn time." The words hung between them, a spark igniting into something brighter. And then she kissed him, soft at first, tentative, like testing the ground after a long fall. But when he kissed her back, it was firm, certain, a promise woven into every touch. The prairie whispered around them, the wind carrying their quiet laughter as they pulled apart, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling in the cool night. "I'm staying," she said, her voice a whisper against his skin. "Here with you, if that's okay." "Okay?" he echoed, grinning. "It's more than okay. It's right." They sat there, wrapped in each other and the vastness of the night, until the lantern light from the garage beckoned them back. Inside, Tommy had unearthed an old radio, its crackly tunes filling the space with a warmth that matched the cocoa. Millie clapped her hands, declaring it a celebration, and they danced, awkwardly at first, then freely, Tommy spinning Millie while Cal pulled Eve into his arms. As the music played, Cal felt the ghosts of his past, his parents, the lonely years, soften into something gentle, a backdrop to the life he was building now. Eve laughed in his embrace, her head tipping back, and he saw a woman who'd shed her burdens, who'd found her place not in wealth or escape, but in the messy, beautiful reality of Dusty Hollow. Later, when Millie and Tommy headed home, Cal and Eve climbed into the truck bed, lying beside Blackbird under a blanket of stars. The motorcycle gleamed faintly, a symbol of their beginning, and Cal traced circles on Eve's hand as she nestled against him. "You saved me, you know," she murmured, her voice sleepy but sure. "Not just from them, from myself." He pressed, a kiss to her forehead, his heart full. "You saved me too, gave me something to fight for." She smiled, her eyes drifting shut, and as the night deepened, Cal looked out at the horizon. endless, open, alive with possibility. His mom's voice echoed in his mind. Kindness doesn't need a reason. He'd given it freely that day on Route 66, never expecting it to lead here, to love, to home, to a future he could feel in his bones. The stars watched over them, silent, witnesses to a journey that began with a spark and ended with a flame, one that wouldn't fade but grow, lighting the way for all the days to come. And that's the end of Flame on the Horizon, a tale of two hearts finding home where the road burns brightest. I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know where you're tuning in from. Are you watching from a small town like Dusty Hollow? Or maybe a big city with its own stories? Your thoughts mean the world to me. If you enjoyed this journey, consider subscribing. It's just a quick click and it helps me bring more stories like this to you. Hit that bell icon too, so you'll never miss an update. And most of all, thank you for watching. Your time and support keep this channel alive. Until next time, take care and keep the flame of kindness burning wherever you are.